I am making this video in the early hours of the morning, so I don't know if that affects the traction or not of viewership. If you're in the UK and you're awake late, please give me a thumbs up. Please share the video. Recently, the traction on my videos hasn't been wonderful, although my subscribership has gone up, so there's a bit of a inconsistency with that. So yeah, but I want to talk about the subject while it's on my mind. I've just been watching a Netflix documentary on cults and how cult leaders are developed. The exact title is How to Be a Cult Leader. It's sort of a satirical title, I guess. It's narrated by the actor Peter Dinklage. So far, I've watched the one on Charles Manson, and now I've watched the one on Jim Jones. Jim Jones, of course, led Jonestown, created the Jonestown commune in Guyana, where he fled with his followers. Sometimes it's described as the largest mass suicide in modern history. It could probably more accurately be described as murder because a lot of the victims were found with ejections and a lot of them were children who were obviously too young to consent to anything. Jim Jones was an evil POS when you look at the background of this. He was basically running really a concentration camp there. It can't be described as any other way because the compound was surrounded by armed guards, so people couldn't escape. Um, One black woman in the documentary said she'd never been on a plantation, but it effectively felt like a plantation. She was obviously one of the survivors. Um, so, although I'm not sure if there were some survivors of the particular massacre, or rather she'd just been an earlier member in the cult. But regardless, um, I decided to look a bit further into this. And last year, well, I assume it was last year because the video says a year ago, there was plans to open guided tours of the site of Jonestown in Guyana. Now, this happened in 1978, so it's not a very, very long time ago. We're talking 48 years ago. It's a while back, but it's, well within living memory. Um, and a lot of the comments were saying how inappropriate it was and how much in bad taste it was. And I must admit, my first instinct was to agree. But then I thought about this. I thought, well, if I agree, I'm a bit of a hypocrite because in my life I've been to numerous sites that have a dark history. And basically, I think if you're this issue of dark tourism, to me, it's one of balance. I think it's a bit dismissive to say that no one should ever visit the sites of dark history, which essentially is dark tourism. I mean, are we really going to say that no one should ever visit a memorial? And then, in order to keep maintenance and so on, a memorial may have to charge admission, a memorial site. I mean, I think it's a bit absolutist to say that no one should ever visit. But for me, the issue is how is it done? That's the key thing. Is it done in a tactful way? Is it done in a way that respects the memory of victims? Or is it done in a glaringly exploitative way? I know that in Milwaukee, there are some very sick tours of Jeffrey Dahmer's murder sites. Now, to me, that's in very bad taste. I've seen a bit of that, and I see absolutely no sense of respect to the victims from the footage I've seen. And there are some freaks that go because they have a fascination with serial killers, and not just in a sort of academic sense of, what makes them think it's almost a borderline admiration. And I think that's a bit weird. Again, it's not that there's anything wrong with being interested in true crime, but this is all about, what's the dividing line between an obsession and exploitation versus simply valid interest. I think there is. It's important to differentiate. So, if you're going to do a guided tour about a serial killer, at the very least, respect the victims. And if the victims' families are saying no, then you should respect that. So when I saw that about the Jeffrey Dahmer thing, I just thought, come on. Um, but in my life, I've been to numerous sites that can maybe be described as dark tourism, although a battlefield wouldn't traditionally be seen that way, but really it is. So back in 1999, me and my family stayed at the Battle of Gettysburg National Park in Pennsylvania. Now, this is visited by thousands of people every year. It's hardly on the margins. It's world famous battle that turned the course of the American Civil War. It's where Lincoln made his famous speech. Because me, my father, and my brother were very interested in the American Civil War. That was a big personal interest for us, and I also had a distant relative who died there, Lieutenant, Second Lieutenant Charles Edward Hayes, who died at Little Round Top. So yeah, we visited the Gettysburg sites, and you could see cannons and all. And I don't think anyone would really say it's in bad taste. It's a national park, right? Likewise, we visited the Battle of the Somme, or rather, me and my dad did in 2003. Feetful Wood. We went to some sites near the town of Albert. We didn't go to the Tyne-Cot Cemetery, the really big one, but we went to some smaller cemeteries. Now, this is the site of one of the world's bloodiest battles, one of the largest battles of the First World War, horrific casualties, and that's clearly a dark history. It was a somber atmosphere, but I never felt it was exploitative. I mean, it's not exactly. I wouldn't necessarily want to live somewhere like that, near the scene of such a horrific battle. I sometimes wonder what would be like to live in the Somme. I guess people just get on with their lives and don't think about it. And then there's other examples. Earlier this year, I was at Intramuros in Old Manila in the Philippines. Intramuros is a historic part of Manila. It was the scene of some horrific Japanese atrocities. And it wasn't just one site. There was one section which had this big, large black marble, I don't know what you would call it, huge urn, I guess, and it actually had the ashes of up to 100,000 people. They probably weren't all in that, of course, but many of them were. 100,000 civilians massacred in a few months at the end of World War II. This is one of the worst atrocities of the war. It's up there with the Warsaw Uprising and the rape of Nanking. Horrific. And to be at those sites, it was quite sobering. And yet, this wasn't in some remote location. This was in the middle of one of the world's biggest metropolitan cities, Metro Manila. So it was a very strange experience, or very interesting. There was parts where you could still see the bullet holes on the old city because Intramuros was the old colonial Spanish part of Manila. Um, and the Japanese used the pre-existing Spanish dungeons for their crimes. I won't go into the details, but if you ever go there, you'll get the idea. They have like video links, they have posters, and not posters, but information boards and so on. There was one site which just had a simple white cross, and underneath that white cross, I believe there was 8,000 victims. 8,000. And up until at least the 1980s, that was closed off. So it's only more recently that they've opened this stuff up. We also went to the island of Corregidor, which was a scene of two major battles in the Philippines campaign. The first one was a Japanese victory, and the second one was an American-Filipino victory. But on the way there, we went through the Bataan Peninsula, which was the scene of the notorious Bataan Death March. Thousands of American and Filipino soldiers basically marched to their death. Horrific human rights abuses, and when we were going back on the car, it was a couple of hours from Corregidor back to Manila, and I was just looking at the countryside thinking like, okay, it's hot, I'm a bit uncomfortable in this cramped car, but this is nothing compared to what those guys went through 81 years ago. Anyway, one of the things we saw in Corregidor was tunnels that basically were collapsed. So it went down a main tunnel, and then there was subsidiary tunnels, and you could literally see the rubble and the masonry and so on had collapsed because as the Japanese knew they were being defeated, there's no other way to put it, they blew themselves up. Now, in the post-war years, Japanese governments started taking back the remains, as many as they could get, but it would have been impossible to get everything. So you're looking at that rubble and you know that there's human remains in there. It's eerie. And we were there during daytime, so you can imagine what it would be like at nighttime. I found Corregidor Island very interesting. I'm pleased I went, but it's an eerie place. It definitely has an atmosphere. Um, and then there was one other site I can cite. Well, actually, I did go. I didn't do a Jack the Ripper tour in London. I didn't go on any formal tour, but I'd done my own research because I was interested in the case and I'd studied it a bit. So I went to Mitre Square, if you're familiar with the Jack the Ripper case, where Catherine Eddowes was killed. I also went to Henrique Street, where the third victim, Liz Stride, was killed. And I went to the grave of Mary Jane Kelly in the Leytonstone Cemetery in East London. Dorset Street's all different today where she was murdered. Now, I don't think I was being a ghoul. For me, it was just an interest in history and an interest in the case. You know, I wasn't being some sort of freak about it. It was just a matter of interest because I knew where the sites were. There's one other site I can mention, which is in Scotland. I went to the Lockerbie Memorial. So the Lockerbie bombing, Britain's worst terrorist attack, or rather the worst terrorist attack on British soil, 1988, 270 people killed, including, by the way, 11 townspeople in the small town of Lockerbie. And it's a memorial which includes someone had a little outline of a Boeing 747. It's not a huge thing, it's a regular cemetery, but then you see this kind of large um, memorial plaque, and it was kind of a somber place because this was within my lifetime. So that's numerous sites: Gettysburg, the Somme, Corregidor, Intramuros, Lockerbie, and you could say the Jack the Ripper sites. So I guess I've had my share of dark tourism. I honestly didn't think any of it was exploitative. And if I thought, there was like that there was anything being sold in a disrespectful way. I mean, I've heard of people, for example, going to Auschwitz. I've never been to Auschwitz, but I've heard of people going there and taking selfies. And I think that, there's nothing wrong with taking a photograph. It's a historic site, but I think somewhere like that, I mean, I think you have to do something in, taste has to come into it. You have to remember that human beings were killed in a particular place, and I think it's okay to go somewhere for interest and even take pictures, but there's certain things that should be limited. I mean, let's say a gift shop, for example. I think it's okay to have some refreshments and maybe some limited merchandise, but I think if it's overdone, then it starts to look disrespectful and garish. So I think that should be. I mean, people need to understand that memorial sites need to be maintained, so they do need funding. That is a fact. They need funding for maintenance, particularly a battlefield. Where does that funding come from, if not for some sort of profiting? So, where's the dividing line between valid profiting and blatant exploitation? Um, that's the question. But I think it's a bit absolutist to say no one should ever visit dark tourism sites. For me, it's the issue of how is it done? Is it done in a respectful way, or is it just exploitative? If you're of the view, oh, no one should ever visit, then okay, do you just dismiss history? Do you just pretend that history hasn't happened? I mean, I certainly wouldn't recommend, if you're a sensitive person, to go to one of these places because they are quite harrowing. But if you're someone who's interested in history, then of course it has an interest. So let me know your thoughts about dark tourism. Have you ever been to a site that's associated with some dark history? I'm sure in my life I'll go to other such places, and I don't feel I'm being exploitative. I don't feel that it's all about how it's done. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but my father told me that at some of the World War I sites, you could buy the old chocolate grenades and stuff. I mean, to me, that would be in bad taste, and that's what he thought. I'm not sure how true that is, but it's all about the level of what is in good taste, what's educational, and I think if something is done, and then there's also the gap of time. I mean, how far back would you go if you visit, for instance, a Roman site? We know that the Roman world was incredibly bloodthirsty. So if you go to the Colosseum, should there be no gift shop? Where do you draw a line? That's the question with this, because I personally think dark tourism does have a place. I don't think it should just be dismissed as in bad taste or exploitative. I do think it has a place, because how else do people learn from history? How else do they see history there up close rather than just reading about it online? And that does serve a purpose if it's. I mean, I know a few years ago Elon Musk was humbled when he had to go to Auschwitz. He said something derogatory about Jews, and whether he learned from it or not, I don't know, but I don't think so, given he spends a lot of time parroting the far right. But yeah, I think that's it. Let me know what you think. Dark tourism.